So you've stopped using all the automatic features on your DSLR camera and can fully operate it on manual mode. Now, are you ready to operate your lens on manual? Hey folks, Tito here, keeping my ideas outside of the box. Before I get started on today's topic, I just want to give a shout out to the completion of Sparking Creativity. This is a short documentary that we made in collaboration with Arts Council Wood Buffalo and Carla White, a local artist in our community. We're super proud of this short film that's going to be coming out later this year. It's doing its festival runs right now, and if you want more information on it and to watch the trailer, make sure you click on the link in the description below. If you're like myself and started making films during the, let's call it the DSLR era of cameras, you probably started making your films using a point-and-shoot type DSLR, taking digital photos and also shooting digital video with a kit lens. Usually that 18 to 55 millimeter lens that comes with the kit that you bought your camera with, which is pretty good, except you start realizing after a little while that you need a little bit something more. And you also notice that some people have better video and it comes down to different lenses that they buy. That's usually when people start mentioning lenses like the Nifty 50, which is the Canon 50mm 1.8 lens, which is kind of the lens that everyone uses to shoot their first version of cinematic footage. The point I'm trying to make is the fact that after a while you start using different lenses, but they're all still photography lenses. Don't get me wrong, photography lenses are great and a lot of cinematic footage is shot on photography type lenses. So why would we need anything else? Why would we even need cinema lenses? I know for myself, when I started shopping for other lenses, I immediately gravitated towards more expensive photography lenses that had the same image quality as some of the lower grade cinema lenses. But really the question is, what exactly is a cine lens and why is it so different from a photography lens? I did a little bit of research to kind of narrow it down to 3 key features that cinema lenses have over photography lenses. The first key feature is an aperture ring. All cinema lenses have aperture rings, but not all photography lenses have aperture rings. Older cameras actually do have aperture rings, but there's a reason for that, because they were all manual. All of the aperture handled in modern lenses, at least the photography type, are handled within the camera itself. That's that little f-stop button that you kind of gauge up and down and you see your image get darker or brighter, or, you know, more shallow depending on the type of lens you're using. The second thing you'll notice is that the aperture on cinema lenses isn't measured with f-stop, it's measured through t-stop, and I'll get a little bit into that more when I break each one down. And the third piece is you'll notice a lot of different cinema lenses from the same company have similar form factor, which doesn't seem like a big deal outside of an aesthetic reason, but is a big deal when I explain filming with them. So there's actually a difference between different types of aperture rings depending on the type of lens that you purchase. So why do cinema lenses even have aperture rings? The truth is, all lenses used to have aperture rings. And in fact, old photography lenses used to have clicked aperture rings so that you could actually control and hold the f-stop that you were shooting your picture at. So the reason this is valuable for cinema lenses is basically the ability to change your aperture while you're filming. The idea being that if, say for example, you were shooting something indoors and then you walk outdoors, you can change the f-stop, or sorry, the t-stop, in order to let in less light once you're outside where there might be sun or some other sources of light that you need to close the aperture for. Old photography lenses can actually be modified to be declicked so that they can function like cinema lenses, and then that way you can manipulate the focus ring that way. So controlling this aperture becomes a very vital tool while filming single shot scenes that might move between different light sources. And you want that to be as smooth as possible, which is why the measurement isn't f-stop but rather t-stop. So I have to get a little bit technical to explain this next part, which is f-stop versus t-stop. F-stop is calculated purely by geometry, which is basically the ratio of the aperture opening against the lens size itself, which is why actually a lower f-stop is a bigger aperture value. So 1 means 1-to-1 lens size against the aperture opening. The main reason people want a lower f-stop is because they want what's known as a faster lens. It allows more light on a briefer time period. This is also how you get that really cool shallow depth of field look when you're shooting portraits or close-ups of people. I could talk for a while about f-stop and shallow depth of field, so if you guys are interested in that topic, please leave a comment below and I'll do a follow-up video about depth of field. So t-stop actually stands for transmission of light. And this is something that f-stop doesn't actually account for. The lens coating, the construction material, the amount of glass that's in. T-stop actually takes these values into account and provides a more accurate measurement of the amount of light transmitting through the lens to the sensor. So why is this even important for cinema lens? T-stops can be very critical when you want to maintain the consistency of light hitting your subject or multiple subjects while shooting a scene. So form factor is the last element of this. And it seems a bit trivial and really just aesthetic that lenses look the same and they have their gears in the same position. But this can actually be a super important part when you're filming on set. And the reason I mention that is because anyone who has been on a professional set or even an indie set knows that getting set up for a shot takes a while. And mainly because there's a number of factors that have to be taken into account. The amount of light coming into the room, where people are moving, etc., etc. And obviously you don't want to film everything on one lens. Well, maybe you do because you only have one lens, but options are always nice. The idea of having an entire series of lenses with a similar form factor allows whoever's shooting the film to switch lenses pretty quickly without changing up their setup too much to do that. So this would be very invaluable for someone who is on a very tight schedule to film something. It doesn't matter if you have all the time in the day, there's usually something that you have to compromise on, and you don't want it to be the technical portions because you want to tell your story. The big question is, do you need to buy cinema lenses now? Absolutely not. There's a wide variety of options for photography lenses to make them the equivalent of a cinema lens. If you're worried that your lens doesn't bring in enough light, buy a lens with a faster aperture. And as I mentioned before, you could always declick an old lens and get that aesthetic of an older lens while still controlling the aperture value. And in addition to that, you can even buy gears that can modify your photography lenses to have the same form factor as a cinema lens. Speaking personally, my favorite lens isn't even a cinema lens right now. It's this 16 to 35 millimeter Canon lens. I normally like to shoot pretty wide on things, and I just really love how this lens distorts faces and makes them look a bit more comic bookish when I'm shooting stuff like cosplay music videos. For those of you that stuck around, and before I say goodbye today, there's a new project coming down the pipeline from MacGuffin Media that's going to require some community involvement. So if you're a filmmaker and looking to collaborate with us in the future, stay tuned to our social media. So go like our social media, and we'll be posting pretty soon about a new upcoming collaborative project that we're hoping to bring new people into. And until next time, this is Tito saying, learn to be professional, but keep that indie passion.